Hi there, and welcome to the Curious Collective podcast, conversations designed for the veteran and first responder community to bring awareness to those holistic practices that help us live our best life. So tap into the wisdom and knowledge of our guests to heal, transform, and live as your true soulful self. Listeners, I have for you today the beautiful Courtney Nolan, who is coming to us from New South Wales. Welcome, Courtney.
Yay!
Finally, we've been wanting to record this for quite a while, so it's so great to have you here. Please share with our listeners what it is that you're doing in the world right now.
So now I have a bougie title, but there's so much under it that I think it's just easier to explain. So I call myself relationship and intimacy consultant, which, yeah, like I said, sounds super bougie. But what I actually do is I do private coaching with people in the space of relationships and sex. Everything from how to communicate better in your relationship to how to have more connected conversations and vulnerable chats about sex. And yeah, so I also work with people with disability to help them feel confident in, social situations and exploring what they want from relationships and finding their own way with their sexuality. So I do, yeah, private coaching, and I do workshops and stuff. So kind of a bit of everything.
I actually love this too because, it's such a taboo, like, ooh,
Mm.
subject. And I only feel now that I've sort of started circulating in the circles that I'm in, people speak about it a lot more openly. I have relaxed my own body into being happy to have these conversations as well. But it's still this very, subject,
Oh
isn't
yeah.
it?
Completely. Like the moment you say that, and I think that's why I initially was branded as sex coaching, because that's what I'm qualified as. So I'm a certified sex coach. But the moment you say sex, people kind of like shut up, and you can see like the physical response to the fact that I'm using that word. So I
Mm.
rebranded and did like the bit of a shift to relationship and intimacy, basically so that people would feel a little bit more comfortable having the conversation, because we all need to be having the convo. But if you can't get to the place where you feel comfortable enough to listen or to learn or to share, it kind of goes right over people's heads. So it is still so taboo, as much as we sort of want to, be comfortable with it. It just takes a lot of time for people to, like we've spoken about before, like to undo some of like their programming or like their subconscious beliefs around it, to get to the place where it's like, oh, actually, what's true for me now? Like, do I actually think sex isn't something that I can talk about, or is sex really all that shameful to discuss or to, to express what I want?
Mm.
Or actually, yeah, I want to be having more of a conversation around this and being able to change your sex life or your relationship or just what you feel comfortable talking about with your kids, like
That's
all
a
that
big
sort of
one. And that's what I was going to ask you is there's two things. Firstly, I want to say,
stuff.
we're both here in Australia. Do you think that Australians are a little bit more than, say, other countries around the world?
Ah, like shit, I don't know. I think we as Aussies like to pride ourselves on being like pretty rough and ready with a lot of things. And, all of my clients are Aussies, even though with a lot of my social platforms, they reach internationally. And I reckon if you were to look at the analytics, they would be more international than domestic. And that's, I don't know. I don't know if people are more comfortable, but when I look at things like their comfort level of people, I think we're just slow. I think we just have got like really traditional views of what sex is and what it means for people that, yeah, I don't know. I think people are just so different and so
Mm.
at different stages of their acceptance with it and what sort of role it plays in your life.
Mm.
Sorry, Kate, I got distracted as I was talking about my own thoughts. What was the question?
Oh, it's just like whether, like European countries are a little bit more open about it. My best friend's
Mm,
European and she's like, just talk to your kids about it.
mm,
And in the car yesterday, an example was I was talking about a son that had delivered his baby sister, like his mother was pregnant and he delivered
yeah.
and my husband, 8-year-olds in the back, goes, oh, who'd want to be down there at the business end? And I'm like, Marcus, like Emily's in the back, like, let's make this it's the female body. It's a natural thing. Like we
Mhm.
grow and create life in ourselves, and this is how it's done. So it's like, how is our rigidness here in Australia creating these patterns and beliefs for
Yeah.
our children?
I think it's like that conservative side of things, like our upbringing. Like, so for me, I went to a religious school. So our sex education was like, here's a maxi pad, blah, 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 separate the girls from the boys. I don't even remember us getting a condom talk. I think it was sort of like, here, watch Mean Girls and watch Coach Carr say, like, everyone take a rubber. Like, I feel like that was like the sex education we got. So I think a lot of the stuff that I like to do now is workshops with even trying to get into schools and stuff like that, to be like, let's just have an accepting conversation. Like, sex isn't icky. It's quite literally how we get on this planet, yet people can be so prudy about it. And it's like, the more you make it this taboo topic, that's where problems come up. Like, people don't know how to talk about pleasure in a sexual relationship, or they don't know how to talk about consent with their kids, and they don't know how to model that either. So even things like being like calling your anatomy different names. Like when I was in the cops, like that was one of the big things that we would see, is people would come in if they're reporting like a sexual assault or something like that, and they wouldn't be able to even correctly name their body parts. So for us in our household, having boys particularly, it's like, no, it's not a fucking ding dong. It's a penis. Like, we're not dressing this up. That's what it's called. So when I do workshops with parents, it's like, you can say, hey, I'm a little bit uncomfortable having this conversation because I wasn't brought up like this, but I'm going to push through, because there's nothing shameful about our bodies. There's nothing shameful about periods. There's nothing shameful about having sex or any of these things, in obviously like a very age appropriate way, but it's just being honest with them. So even though it's like, oh, I don't feel super comfortable talking about this, but we're going to do it anyway, because there's nothing embarrassing about your body. There's nothing embarrassing about like making inquiries about like, well, what actually happens, or what goes where, or how does that work? Like, kids are so smart. They'll be able to feel all of that and know that you're lying if you're like, oh no, it's called a woo-woo, and babies get dropped off by a stork. Like, it's just, I think it's just, it's not just one conversation, especially with kids or your partner. Like, it's a series of conversations. And I think that's the way that we will make people feel more comfortable having a chat. Like, it's not going to be some big, scary combo. It's
Softening the edges of it.
Totally.
So it's not so sharp.
Yeah.
And there is polarities. I know, like, some people just do not want to talk about it. It's shut off completely. And then there's the opposite, where it's too much. And you're like, can we just be in the middle of the river here? Because this is too much for me.
Completely. So yeah.
So this work that you're doing now, so important, so powerful. And thank you. I know that you've got a podcast as well, which I'm sure you can mention. I've listened to a lot of those episodes. How did you get to be doing this sort of work, and what sent you on this trajectory?
So I left, so I was a police officer for a number of years, and then came to the point in my career where I was like, I don't actually think this is for me any longer. It's not what I want to be doing anymore. And left and started to study a couple of different things, like neurolinguistic programming and training to be like a coach and like a mindset coach. But a lot of the people that I was seeing were very much like issues with relationships. So I started to study that, and I studied sex coaching and yoni mapping, and sort of dove right into the sex world of things, and was like, I want to know everything and anything that there is to know about sex and relationships and intimacy, and started down that path. And from there, my business just really grew to the point where I was doing private coaching with people in a relationship space, but also helping people who are neurodivergent to understand how they can still be sexual, or how they can understand their sexuality and still have really fulfilling relationships, even though the way that they communicate might be a little bit different. So I think, I don't know if it was just leaving the police and still wanting to do something super meaningful and like service-based. Obviously, like, not everyone's a big fan of the police. So I was used to doing something that was still a bit controversial. Like, people either love the cops or hate the cops. So to me, now talking about sex, people either love it or hate it. Like at the beginning. So it's kind of water off a duck's back if people aren't comfortable with it. But I think somebody needs to be having the conversation about how we can be safe when it comes to sex, or safe when it comes to online dating, or, those sorts of things. And I just love it. So we're just at the point now where business is booming, and it's just seriously incredible to be able to still serve, but in a completely different way, where it's like I have such a holistic approach with clients that it's like, okay, well, what is it that's the problem? Is it the sex that's the problem, or is it the communication, or is it like a physical barrier, or like what's going on? And I think just having worked in the cops and having seen people at like their rawest and just like such a different cross section of society, that now I have such a deeper understanding of like what people are actually going through. Like it's it's not as black and white as I once thought maybe things were. So the journey has not been like a straight line by any means, but I don't know, private coaching is awesome, and running workshops, they are probably like the dark guts of what I do, because I love it. Like presenting to people and like just helping you understand how you can talk in a relationship and how you can be your complete self. Knowing how to set boundaries and respect other people's without eroding your own. Like that's a really fine line.
Boundaries, huge.
Sometimes.
Let's get into some juicy stuff. So this work that we do and the, sex is all around connection to the body. So I feel like I'd love to talk to you about, communicating within a relationship. If you're not connected to the self, which is kind of the work I do, self-connection work, how can you then communicate or have an intimate relationship with someone else? So I'd love to hear your take on that about, being connected to yourself first before, not 100% before, but before having that deeper connection with someone else. Not rushing in,
And I think I suppose what I think I see and saw so much is it's just, if you don't know who you are and what you value and what you want, you're going to have a really hard time being able to communicate that to somebody else. And then if you think about what happens when you don't know what you want, you're being led by somebody else, you get to the point where you're like, oh, actually, this is definitely not it. And then you're either going to be resentful to that person or angry at that person because they haven't given you what you want, but you haven't said what you want. So they're kind of in this place of like, well, what did I do wrong? So this is why like I love what you do. And I love the way that you can understand yourself like energetically and spiritually, and understanding what your body's telling you, because so much of our conditioning is like, don't believe what your body's telling you. Like even like having kids, right? Like you constantly hear parents say like, oh, you're okay, get up. Like if you've had a fall or something, it's like, well, hold on a minute. Like, let's let that kiddo work out what they're actually feeling before you're rushing in to tell them what they're feeling. So it's like, let them trust themselves. Oh, actually, like, I mean, we all know, like, it's a tiny little bump that might not even be a graze if they've fallen off their back. Like, we know they're okay. But by rushing in and being like, you're okay, nothing's fine, don't cry about it, there's no space to actually check in with your body to be like, am I okay? Yeah, of course I'm fine. Like this was a bit of this was a fright, or I got a shock, or that was a big solid bump that happened on my knee. So we don't even have that ability to listen to ourselves. So then you fast forward to a relationship in adult life, and it's like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm just feeling agitated, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm overstimulated. I don't know. I don't know how to say that.
Or I'm seeking, like, I don't know how I'm feeling, so I'm externally seeking. Give me all the things I want.
Completely. And then it's like, that's super unfair to our partners to be like, I need all of this, like fill my cup. And it's like, hold on, I need to learn to do that myself. And I think becoming a mom, that was something that I was like, okay, I'm just giving. I'm giving all the time to everyone. Like I'm constantly holding space for everybody but myself. And having little boys, it's like there was no feminine energy around me. Like the cops, like being in the police is super masculine. In my masculine all the time, that I just was like, there's no softness to me anymore. There's no space for me to be like that real vulnerable in my feminine where I can go with the flow. So I think that was like a really big part of me where I'm like, no, I want her back. I want that really sensual side of myself back. I want to be able to like tap into any one of my senses at any point in time. I want to be able to hear what those are telling me, like really be conscious of like the feedback that I'm getting. So it did get to that point. And then I think about that when I apply that to my couples that I work with, when we do like either couples work, or I'm having one member of the relationship come in and see me. And I'm like, okay, well, how well do you know yourself? Like, are you aware of what's happening? Like when you get frustrated, like, do you know what you're frustrated about? Or do you even recognize that you're frustrated? Or, then working in that way with the communication first before we even get to the bedroom. Because if we can't talk about the fact that, hey, the way that you've hung the tea towel really shits me off, there's no way you're going to be able to say, hey, I actually find missionary boring as heck. Can we try something else? It's like
You
That's
don't
why
want
they
to offend the person.
completely. And if it's not in your like sort of like relationship toolkit to be able to say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, I'm unsure about this in a G-rated sense, you add sex to that, which is super vulnerable and can be very confronting. People aren't going to say what they want, aren't going to get what they need, or it's going to come across really like attacking, or, people get defensive straight away because it's like, they don't know. So
This,
when we talk about like the communication, it's like inside the bedroom, it's like it's really slow. Like you have to, like you're walking a fine line. You really are sort of like, ooh, ginger with the way that you chat. So that's why when we do work in a communication way and we are working on couples communication, the way that you know yourself and the way that you can read yourself, that's on you. It's not on your partner to be like, oh, you're doing this. This means you need blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You need to take the time to put yourself first, particularly as moms, or if you've been in a service industry, like you're probably most of your audience, right? You're used to looking after other people before yourself. So it's not intrinsic for you to be like, hey, hold on, what am I feeling? It's like external. Who can I look after before me? So it is hard for us who've been in these roles to do that. So yeah, it takes a bit of adjustment.
I love that you use that relationship toolkit and the example of being able to communicate within, the G-rated home, the tea towel, perfect analogy. What popped into my mind is like a male that has been in this heavily masculine dominated spaces of service, veteran, first responder, and he's like, go, 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 need protect. I need to protect and look after and please and be all the things, right?
Yeah.
Then taking that pressure on self into the bedroom is like, well, I need to be doing all these things. But then there's no communication. Like, I'm sure you see that a lot. And if you wanted to speak into that a bit, I would love that for the listeners.
Oh, completely. Like, I don't know if it's the fact that I was in the cops that veterans seem to seek me out because I understand it, or that my hubby, was 20 years in the police himself. So I don't know which one of those things it was, but I seem to see a few vets and they say the same thing. They're like, oh, like I need to be doing like, and it's like coming from such a loving place of like, I need to pleasure her. I need to do this. I need to do that. And it's like, but sex is less about the doing and all about the feeling. So for our like real alphas or like people in their masculine the whole time who need
That
like
haven't felt for years.
completely right. Who need like a task list of like, hey, I'm going to kiss her neck and she's going to do this. I'm going to put my leg here and we're going to do that. And then we'll, get to this. It's like a system, right? And that's not sex. Like that is boring as fuck. Like that might work, the first however many times, but particularly for long-term relationships, that's not flying anymore. Like that is boring. And that's when you'll feel the disconnect because neither of you are feeling satisfied. It's just not going to work. So when you've been in your doing for so long, getting back into your feeling is purely about activating your senses and communicating that. Because it's like, it's a whole new way of feeling what you're feeling and being able to recognize it and talk about it. But for vets and first responders, like we intrinsically look outside to help first. We don't go, oh, what am I feeling in my body? So in like these couples that I see, it's like you just want to serve your person, which yes, that's part of it.
And they get this like, why doesn't she want me type thing?
Completely like what's
What
happening?
am I doing wrong?
Yeah. And what am I doing wrong? And it's like, well, nothing. We just need to shift the way that we do things because sex is all about feeling. So even, sometimes with some of the exercises that I'll do, it'll be like the homework will be like, okay, like, no, don't have any sex. Like, don't do that. Like for the next fortnight until we see each other again, no sex. We are purely just playing together in like an intimate, sensual way to activate every one of your five senses. So the homework is not penetrative sex. That's not the end game. The goal is just to see which one of our senses are heightened the most, have a play into that and see what that looks like or feels like or smells like or tastes like. We're just doing that. It's not about the end game because like if you think about how much we're taught sex is about orgasm, everyone needs to come, happy days. And if you put that as the goal or the end game for anyone who's in their masculine, they'll be like, cool, that's where I need to go. That's how can I get there the quickest? What's the most efficient way that I can do this? Pow, 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 couple of pumps, sweet, that should be great. There's minimal foreplay. It's just like, boom, here we go. And that's why people are sort of like losing the connection because for a lot of women, It's an emotional thing. Like we need our emotional needs met before we even feel like we want to have sex.
And I want
Whereas
to
if you're
add to that as well is
go
like
for it.
those women that are cut off from their emotions and they're not wanting to feel will just be like, I'm just going to subjugate myself. Let's get this over with. Come on. And
Completely.
then, crack on with all the things they perceive they need to do.
Completely. And that, I think that's the point where when we look at sex and when I teach sex and I coach couples, I'm like, this is not an end game thing. We are not just like seeing who can come the fastest or the loudest or the longest or blah. That's not what we're doing.
Mm.
The whole point of sex is to have a connection. And you think about how you feel when you've had like that really good sex where it's like you're so intuitive with each other. You're actually listening to each other's bodies. You're like moving with it. There's no set plan. There's no time frame. There's no limit, which is when things start to feel so much more connected, and then you have that postcoital bliss instead of like, here's a towel, clean yourself up. I'm going to do XYZ in the kitchen because we didn't clean it. Like it's sort of like, it feels really like, just
Ugh.
let's just tick this off. Yeah, it feels like, oh, I'll just, like a pity fuck or something like that.
Mm.
It's like, oh, I'll just throw you this. So, so that you get what you need, but it doesn't feel complete. Like you don't feel like your cup's been filled up. You don't feel like that deep sense of connection
Mm.
because you haven't actually got it. Like you both might have come, maybe not, but you haven't done the whole thing of like what's supposed to happen. So having been in like your masculine for so long, it can feel really hard and scary and confronting to be told, hey, you need to be in your feminine to just see what that feels like, to listen a little bit more and to feel more of a sexual connection. It's like, if you aren't having sex with your partner, like to me, this is like one of the things that I ask straight up. And I'm like, well, how long has it been? And what is the quality of the sex? Like, what's that like? Like, it's such a really good barometer for like the quality and strength and health of your relationship. Like, well, what does your sex life look like? Like,
And on the end of the things that I do, I love everything that you have just shared. Is like proper deep connection and sexual connection moves energy through the body. So random things can happen, like straight after you can like cry, and then unless you're communicating that, the male or female might go, well, what are you crying about? Have I broken you? Is something wrong?
yeah,
It's like nothing is wrong, like at
yeah,
all.
completely. And it's just, like you're saying, like everything is communication. I think that is like, as boring as that sounds, it's like everything comes back to that. There's no hard and fast way that you can improve it. It is purely consistency and practice with communicating. Like there's no lost causes. It's just your willingness to try and your willingness to just be able to adapt and to change to it. Because, like growing up, it's like men don't cry and men don't have, share their feelings or talk about their feelings. And it's like,
Blah
what
blah blah.
bullshit is that? Like, do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? But
story.
it takes a lot to unwrap that for some people. And I think
Yeah.
that's why, like, when it's patience and like the willingness of both members of the relationship to be able to change and to change things. Like when I met my husband, he'd just come out of a marriage, and it was all like he's, been in the cops for so many years. So
Mm.
no, talking about feelings was not first and foremost of like what he was used to. And I was like, well, you're gonna have to get used to it if you want this relationship to work. I'm like, you need to learn. We need to work this out because, this is how we function. Like, I am not a mind reader and I don't want to have the pressure to guess what you're thinking or feeling either. So it takes time and it takes practice. And I think that's where there's responsibility on both members of the relationship to be like, okay, I can hold space for you while you're still figuring out how to verbalize what you're feeling. Like, it's not
Yeah.
perfect. And even now, it's still not perfect. But
Yeah.
just being able to hold space for somebody else while they're like clunky with their feelings or emotions or verbalizing it. It's like, cool, I don't expect you to, be perfect at it. And sometimes it's going to come out and it's going to be offensive or a bit curt or a bit rough. But I'm like, I'd way rather you say it and then us pick through it and be like, okay, where
Yeah.
did this come from? Than to not say it at all.
Yes.
So I think that's like the relationship communication piece where it's like, it's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect because that's not even an option when it comes to communication. It's just a
Yeah,
willingness
stop
to
and
try.
willingness to try. I love that. And stop going around it. In order to move it, you need to go through it,
Totally.
and experience all the things. And a lot of our conversation here has been about male female couples, but also within same sex. The same principles apply within same sex relationships. Communication is always key, and the
Completely.
vulnerability within that space is like being willing to communicate in that space.
Yeah.
Start in
Yeah.
the normal life and then open up the channels in the in your bedroom.
Completely, because a lot of the time you'll hear, like, we've all been in those friendship circles where bloody Susan is always whinging about her husband doing da 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 da, and it's like, but how much do you tell him that? Like, do you speak that to him? Like, does he know? Like, we were just on holidays recently. We were sitting at one of the breakfast locations in the hotel, and there was like a family next to us, and the male has gone to do something with the kids over by the pool, and then the female is sitting there talking to one of her friends, and she's like, oh, he's so useless, blah blah blah, like, look at him, he won't even do this. I bet you he'll let them get their shoes in the pool. But like, this whole rant, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God, like, old mate's done something so good, like taking the kids away so mum can finish having brekkie and finish her coffee. And this mom was like ripping into him in such like a degrading, patronizing, like horrible way, and to somebody outside the relationship. And that for me was just like, again, you only see the snippet, and it was only a tiny little snippet. So like, there could be so many other things happening, but on this level, I'm like, holy cow, you were talking about someone that you're spending your life with, or you've got kids with.
Yeah.
And this is how you're talking about them to somebody outside your relationship. I wonder, A, if it's the same behind closed doors, or B, if he doesn't even know how you feel. And I'm like, it's just like, you can see the disconnect, like you could feel the disconnect. And it's like, if you want your partner to step up, being mindful of how you talk to them or about them, particularly when they're not there, will provide the biggest insight about where you're at or how much respect you have for this person. And just even being critical of yourself, or just like looking inwards to be like, well, how did I actually say that? Like,
Oh, it's clunky and it's difficult at the start, especially I'm thinking now as you're talking is, saying something along the lines of you making me feel blah is a no, because it's like, you are feeling that way because that's you. Your partner isn't making you feel that way. You can communicate how you're feeling.
Yeah. It's complete ownership. And I think that's why sometimes I have those really frank conversations with couples or with whoever I'm seeing at that time. And they're like, oh, like, shit, Court, like that was a bit rough. And I was like, yeah. But now you're processing it. How do you feel? Like, just sit with it and feel it. Like, why was it so rough for you to hear that? Is it because it's true? Like, is it because it's true? And maybe, the delivery hasn't been so good, or you haven't accepted any responsibility on that part, or there's been like no accountability. Like, why is she unhappy in the bedroom? Or why is he doing blah, blah, blah? It's like, what's like, I think this is one of the things that I say often. It's like, well, what's your role been in this? So like, what role have you played for us to be here, or for that to have happened? Like, what was your role? Instead of it being like pointing the finger and being like, they're doing this, or this is what's happening, or I'm unhappy. It's like, okay, well, what's your role been up until this point?
Yeah.
Like, have you put effort into your relationship? Like, I think that was probably the biggest thing that I noticed from all of my other relationships to the one that I'm in with my husband now. It's like, instead of it thinking that things just needed to be bliss 24/7 and it just be a cruisy ride, I actually got to that point where I realized you have to put the effort in. You have to be willing to be an active member of this. Like, it's not just going to be like a fairy tale. Like, you really do need to put effort in. And that is not always the sexiest stuff people want to hear. I'm like,
and forcing harmony within life. I've done that for years. I've been like, sunshine and rainbows, everything's okay. It's not. But it actually causes stress on the body, the whole body.
Completely. And I mean, particularly as women, like, a lot of the stuff that we store is in like our sacral, as you say, but like in our womb space, so in our yoni. So it's like, if you are storing like emotions or like blocked memories or anything like that, and if you don't intentionally shift through any of that energy, that will affect so many things, like how you show up, how you are in your feminine energy, how you feel in your sex, how you do any of these things, how you parent or mother or that. So it's really is just having a conscious look at where you're at and what you're feeling and what might be blocking you, and then moving forward, because blaming and pointing the finger and just holding everybody else responsible for your feelings and where you're at, it's not sustainable, and it's really not true. Like, it's not a true reflection of where you're at.
I love it. Such quality advice. There's so much in that. I feel like that little snippet there is like a whole podcast in itself, like the actual sacral womb space yoni. So Put a pin in that one.
Put a pin in that. We'll do a yoni mapping, yoni something separate. We'll do that for people who are interested. It'd be a separate one.
Absolutely. So last question. If people are interested in exploring this deeper work within relationships, relationship with self, relationship with others, moving that into their own sex lives, what advice do you have for those just peeping in and curious?
First of all, I love that people are curious. If you are open with yourself and you're like, oh, actually, there is a bit of like work to be done here. I love that. I think that's the first place to start, because that to me says accountability and responsibility, which are two essentials in relationships. Actually, one of the things I recommend couples whenever I see somebody new is to do a couples check-in. And I think this is my biggest plug, because I know that it works because I do it in my own relationship. And what it is every Sunday or a day of your choosing, particularly if you do shift work, like it can be flexible, but once a week, set out the time to have a conversation with your partner. And if you're new to this and you just don't even know what to say or where to start, don't worry, I got you. I've on my Instagram, I have heaps of, every Sunday I'll drop a list of questions, but basically what you're doing is you're setting aside the time to be like, hey, let's check in with each other, and then go through about 10 different questions. You can write your own if you want. Like sometimes like I'll task couples to write their own. And it's what works for you. And it's like, hey, how are you feeling? How can I support you this coming week? What did I do to upset you? What did I do to make you happy? Like, how do you feel in our intimacy right now? What ways can I better show you that I love you? And it's just going through, say, 5 to 10 questions and being open with each other. It's non-judgmental. It's not pointing the finger. It's not drudging up things from, 5 years ago when you got, whatever happened. It's just about trying to build that habit of open communication with each other, that pattern of listening, which, yes, we want to be able to voice what we're thinking, but also being able to listen to our partners is a whole skill that is forever evolving. But being able to listen and not just waiting for your turn to speak is literally amazing.
Gold.
It's gold. It's gold in a relationship. Like being able to talk for sure. And as you can tell, I can talk underwater. But being able to listen is really important. So for anyone thinking about, hey, what can I do to my relationship to like just get back on the same page or deepen connection, set aside the time, make it every week, like get a wine, have a sit down when the kids are in bed, or, after you guys have both finished your block of shifts for that week, like sit down and be like, hey, just really check in, like, how are you? What can I do to help you? Are you looking for support this week? What can I do? Like, and be honest, like, hey, actually, I need you to pick the kids up on Tuesday. Or, hey, actually, when you didn't text me on Sunday night when I knew that you were on night shift, like that really upset me. Like nothing is too trivial. Like the smaller, the better. Hey, when you parked on, in the driveway and I had to park on the street, that really shit me off. Like those are the tiny, tiny little building blocks that your relationship depends on you being honest.
Yeah, I want to know that stuff.
Totally, totally. But people think that they're too trivial and don't say it. And I'm like, yes, they can seem really, really small, but if you get in such a habit of this, things don't have the chance to fester.
And that's the energy of it. You say it, it's out there and it's got to be processed. But if you don't say it, it's in you.
And then you're still unhappy. So it's like, it's not going to happen overnight. Like if you're one of you still does whatever it is, like let's take the driving example. If one of you still has that habit of parking in the driveway or parking too far over that you can't get in and blah, 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 but it's not going to happen the first time you say it. But by having that regular weekly check-in where you're like, hey, this happened. Hey, I know I mentioned this before. This is still happening. And your partner's like, oh, shit, I'm really trying to redo that habit. I'm working on it. Then at least like you've got that touch point. Every week you can have this where you can get it off your chest and you can say it in like that completely safe container with each other, that it's not turning into a screaming match on the street. Like, are you fucking kidding me? You've parked on the driveway again. Like you're creating a container where you can be vulnerable with each other and you can be completely open and honest. Like nothing is too trivial. So then when you get to the point of being like, in the bedroom or, something sex related where it's like, hey, actually, I want to try da 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 da, or hey, I want to try a sex club, or I want to try this position, or let's try this new toy. It's not as big of a jump of like a communication topic. It's not this massive thing where
someone off guard and they're like, oh.
Completely. And you're not bringing out like a big double ender at, the middle of your sex thing. Like you've had the conversation beforehand. So it's not like, oh, frig, where did this come from? You've got
Yeah.
that really good habit in, like I said, your relationship toolkit of being open, honest, and trusting. And that's
Yeah.
what your relationship's built on. So,
Great modeling to those that have children as well. My goodness. Like to model to your children that open lines of communication is invaluable.
shit, yeah. I said to a client this week, I was like, he was going through some stuff with his spouse and he's really working on, like, he's taking full ownership. Like, he's a vet and he's taking full ownership of where he's at with his stuff and like being able to share more. And we were talking about the relationship and I was like, look, like, let's be honest, like, your kids, would you be happy if they were in a relationship exactly like yours right now when they grow up?
Mm.
Like, would you be happy with that? And he was like, oh my God.
Reality check.
And he's like, wow, like that just puts it in a different lens. Like, what are you modeling to them? Like, are you snipping at each other? Are you giving the little butt grabs as you're passing each other in the kitchen? Are you giving the pecks on the cheek? Are you saying, hey, baby, you look beautiful today? Or, hey, I did this, or what? Like, are you talking lovingly to each other? Or is it like completely disconnected and you're just flatmates in the house? Like, what are you
Mm.
modeling for them? Like, yes, for yourself, 100%. But when you've got kids and they're so impressionable, if they had the same relationship that you've got right now, would you be proud of that? Would you be proud for them to be in that?
Oh, Courtney, that part at the end is just, we have to end on that beautifully high note because that is so important. And what a beautiful way to frame it. And I want people to use this as a reflective practice after you've listened to this podcast. If you are in a relationship with young children or children, teenagers, any,
Mm,
to see this for yourself, self-reflective. And I love that you put those questions up on your Instagram because I know even within my own relationship, we kind of just talk about the kids and work. It's like, but I
totally.
want to talk about more. I just don't know where to start. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that we'll be on Zoom somewhere together in the future. And Katie out.